Hello everyone, and welcome back to your monthly dose of book releases where we focus on brand new fantasy, sci-fi, and horror books releasing in the new month ahead. And February is absolutely packed with some amazing new books that I am so pumped to talk about and read myself, as a few of these I'll be reading in February. I do have 25 books here on my list, so no need to make this a long introduction. Get your wish list, Goodreads, paper and pen, whatever you got, ready to go. So let's begin. On February 6th, we have Infinity Alchemist, starting off with a beautiful cover. This is a new YA fantasy from Case and Calendar that is set in a world where all people have magic, but only a few select people have very powerful magic, which I think is a really cool concept. We follow Ash, who gets a job as a groundskeeper assistant at a university and practices alchemy in secret, but he gets himself mixed up in something dangerous when he stumbles upon something in a professor's office. It's dark, there's forbidden magic, and I believe there's some dystopian elements mixed in as well. Your Shadow Half Remains. I'll be reading this one in February as I'm very curious about it, and for good reason. It's being promoted as The Last of Us meets Bird Box. Say no more. It's set in a world where looking into someone's eyes, so any sort of eye contact leads one to go mad and violent. So very much taking that idea from Bird Box, but hopefully making it unique with our main character who is surviving in a isolated cabin and an unexpected guest arrives. Really excited for this one as I loved The Last of Us and Bird Box, the book. So this one is hitting home for me for sure. Ali Hazelwood, who is mostly known for her contemporary romances, has an interesting book coming out called Bride. This is the first book to a new paranormal series that is still sticking to the romance theme, but it's about the daughter of a higher-ranking vampire family who is pulled from living amongst the humans to marry the alpha of the local werewolves. But the vampires and werewolves aren't exactly besties, as you know, lore would have it. There's angst, drama, probably. This is probably going to check a lot of your boxes, and I hope it lives up to your expectations. Speaking of werewolves, that time I got drunk and needed a love potion at a werewolf. Man, these titles are getting a little out of hand. I love it. This is book 2 in the Mead Mishaps series that Orbit Books is republishing with beautiful new covers. It's a cozy, silly romantasy. Obviously, it's a sequel, so I can't explain the plot too much, but it's a very lighthearted series with its spicy moments that includes the prominent monster romance. We have Bree, who's being harassed at a bar, so she goes to throw a drink that is spiked with a love potion at him, but it hits Felix, the blonde werewolf from book 1. And this causes a cascade of issues. And we also have The Trials of Empire, the third and final book to one of my favorite epic fantasy trilogies of all time. I'm so pumped for it. This takes place directly after the second book, in the midst of all the action with our empire being threatened. There's an evil tyrant and a group of characters who have to save the day. But honestly, it's so much more than that. It has a really cool magic system. This is the epitome of what good fantasy is, in my opinion, and I'm so sad to see it end. But at least we can relax knowing Richard Swan will spend the rest of his life writing books for us. Or else. Finally, moving on to a new date, we have February 13th, and the first book is Nefera. Am I saying this correctly? I know my Egyptian mythology, but damn, I'm struggling with this name. This is a book that covers the ancient time of Egypt, clearly. I don't think it's any surprise. This really features this person's daughter, so I don't embarrass myself trying to pronounce it. One of the most mysterious figures in history. No one knows much about this lost princess, but the story presents what her life could have been like, caught between her mother and her half-brother/husband. Yes, if you've ever taken the time to look up the family tree in Egyptian times, it's like taking a pencil and just scribbling like a giant circle, like over and over again. But it's a fascinating time period nonetheless, and hopefully this is a fun one. The Princess Protection Program. This sounds like a fun start to a middle grade series. Here we follow Rosamund, aka Sleeping Beauty, who is rescued by a prince but finds herself at a school for runaway princesses that teaches them how to equip the skills they need to survive in the real world. But of course, something is a little off, a little sus. I can totally get behind a fractured fairy tale like this with a twist. It sounds really cute, and I definitely want to look out for whether you're young or older. Projections. So this is by the author who wrote Vasa and the Night, which came out quite a few years ago, and she's coming out with her adult debut with Tor. This is part historical fantasy, part horror, that sounds very strange. We're following Catherine, who has been murdered by her childhood friend, and the connection that they have keeps her spirit alive, just long enough to seek revenge. It has like a ghostly murder mystery thriller sound to it. A lot of things going for it, actually, because reviewers mention a cool magic system, so it sounds like it dips its toes in everything. Another very moody Gothic read that's coming out in February is The Warm Hands of Ghosts, which is by the one and only Catherine Arden, who is known for her beautiful writing and atmospheric stories. But in this novel, we follow Laura, an injured Canadian World War I nurse who longs to find her younger brother, who is a missing soldier, and this leads her to finding help in unexpected places. It's a mix of history and fantasy. There's fantasy somewhere in the mix, and grief and war. It sounds very different from the Winter Night trilogy, so I really don't know what to expect plot-wise, but I'm sure it's amazing, and I'm sure many of you have this on your TBR already. A Flame in the North, a Norse-inspired epic fantasy where we follow an elemental magic wielder. It kind of reminds me of H.M. Long's The Four Pillars series. We have our main character as she and her shield maiden are forced to make a long journey with this group of northerners to some secret location. I'm always looking for a new Viking fantasy, as I tend to really enjoy them, so I'm really looking forward to this one. So next up, I might butcher this title, so I am so sorry. Gugmagog? Who really knows if I'm saying that correctly? But anyways, you get the point. It's right here. So I adore this cover so much, and I honestly might have to check it out myself because of it. It helps that the plot sounds wild. We follow a retired soldier who is tasked to ferry a passenger up a river. But the river itself is the ghostly body of a dead dragon, and the crazy ghost stuff doesn't end there apparently. I don't even know where the story could go, but I want to find out. So hey, subscribe because I might do a review for this one. What Feast at Night. This is book 2 in the Sworn Soldier series, which are novellas, by the way. You'll probably be better off recognizing the cover for book 1 here on the screen. I thoroughly enjoyed its predecessor, and it's funny because I had no idea there was going to be a sequel. And I feel bad because I'm pretty sure my biggest con in book 1 was that it ended abruptly and too open-ended. And well, here's why. This is following the same characters, Alex, Angus, and Miss Potter, as they take up residency in Alex's hunting lodge. But they come to find out that the caretaker of the lodge has died under suspicious, monstrous circumstances. It sounds just like the first one, a fun, bite-sized horror story, and you really can't go wrong with picking it up. And Education and Malice, this is the latest dark academia adult fantasy hitting shelves and has a lot of readers in a frenzy, as it also involves sapphic vampires. We have rival students who are drawn together into a dangerous game of politics and magic and murders, all in the pursuit of knowledge because, you know, it's a school setting, so that all makes sense. Oh, it's set in the 1960s, which is very interesting. So, mysteries, murders, and vampires sounds like a whole vibe. Be sure to add this one to your wish list. Medea. Greek mythology fans definitely want to get in line for this one. This is along the same lines as Circe, Ariadne, and the Song of Achilles. Obviously, here we have the retelling of Medea, a sorceress who is the wife of Jason, and this tells her life story in a very badass sort of way. So if you like your Greek goddesses flawed and not afraid to step on some toes, here's the recommendation you're looking for. This is a debut novel, which is exciting, and I hope it lives up to the hype. Okay, moving along to February 20th, Son of Blood and Ruin, a new vibrant debut that takes us on a journey through 16th century New Spain, blending Mesoamerican mythology and Mexican history. So already, that sounds unique as hell. We have a young noblewoman who is able to transform into a panther, and she fights against the injustices inflicted upon indigenous people during Spain's colonization. How freaking cool does that sound? So it's like a fantasy vigilante story with mythical creatures that are way more than myth, like living and breathing. I hope it's as rich as it sounds. The author of the Falconer trilogy is releasing a new book in February called To Cage a God, a YA fantasy with a premise about overthrowing a corrupt empire which is ruled by a evil empress, and we follow 2 foster sisters. And they're both branching out and having their own plot and their own romance, apparently. What really intrigues me, and you can definitely see it in the cover, it's set in a world influenced by Imperial Russia. There's dark politics, an epic expansive world. Oh, and this is going to be just a duology. My Throat and Open Grave. Doesn't this look so creepy? I love it. So this is supposedly a labyrinth retelling, but with a a lot more like folk horror elements, like body horror and blood. So it is very dark. And I don't know if it's supposed to be a Labyrinth retelling or if reviewers are just comparing it to that, but nonetheless, I don't think the cover is telling us otherwise with how dark it's going to be. This is a story about a girl who wishes her baby brother away after he won't stop crying to the Lord of the Wood. And it actually works. He goes missing, but now she must get him back. She goes to the wood and is greeted by something she would have never expected. Reviews for this one are very positive so far. A Tempest of Tea. No, don't take the title too much to heart. It's not exactly a cozy fantasy about tea, but actually about a heist with vampires. Vampires is a very trendy topic in February. We have Arthi, our main character, who is a criminal mastermind with a tea room that transforms into an illegal blood house that caters to vampires. But she receives a threat and of course has to go out of her way to save this secret of hers. It's set in a historic English setting. It's reminding me a lot of Six of Crows, but not every heist book is Six of Crows. Just like the vibe is reminding me of it. Moving on to February 27th, we have Kindling. Tracy Chi is gifting us with a new YA fantasy following a group of child soldiers, aka Kindling. I really like that metaphor actually, who are unsure of what to do now that war is over because they were used as weapons, but they come together for one last battle when a village is threatened with violence. This is actually a standalone fantasy, which is refreshing, taking elements from other samurai stories, creating a complete one here. It does sound really sad though and dark, but the cover is awesome, so I'm sold. Another title I'm probably going to butcher because I've never read these books, so excuse me, but the Book of Elrian. Anyways, we are living in a time where Martha Wells' previous books are getting updated and revised, and this is the next one. This is collecting her Element of Fire and Death of the Necromancer for the first time in one single place. That's right. Both novels are included here in omnibus form. So Martha Wells fans, rejoice. I'm sure you're going to want this in your collection. A Fate Inked in Blood, a very hyped book for February. This is a new Norse-inspired romantasy, but by a well-known romantasy author. This is all about Freya, who is in a unhappy marriage and dreams of becoming a warrior. Her wish does in fact come true, but not exactly how she expected it. She becomes a pawn for a powerful Jarl, which reveals her divine blood, whatever that means. Probably part of the magic system. This sounds like a fun fantasy world with Vikings and magic and battles. You can't have a Norse-inspired book without battles. That's my rule, and this apparently has them. The Butcher of the Forest. This is a haunting fairy tale novella, which introduces us to Varys, who is summoned by a tyrant leader to go on a quest to fetch two children who went missing in this ancient wood, and she only has one day to find them. She's done it once before, so maybe she can do it again. I just love the nail-biting mission this story has, and I think it will work. It sounds intense and atmospheric, almost like grim fairy tale-like, especially with a title like that. Tomorrow's Children. Dystopian lovers will definitely want to check this one out. It's a post-apocalyptic story set within the ruins of Manhattan. A toxic cloud has completely separated the island from the rest of the population and is leading to people mutating. I honestly really love survival stories like this, and I just don't read enough of them. Supposedly there's like independent neighborhoods, which kind of reminds me of Fallout. I am a Fallout junkie, so maybe there's some like turf war going on in the midst of all the danger. I don't know. It sounds cool, and I just had to add it to my list. The Lore of the Wilds, a fantasy that focuses on the idea of an enchanted library with characters who are fae. The protagonist here is named Lore, and she is given little choice in leaving her village, and when she arrives at the fae castle, she's instructed to help catalog and clean up a magical library, which sounds like, oh, that sounds so like such a satisfying story. Some reviews have mentioned this is a very cozy cottagecore, but it does have its grim moments. In fact, I think this is being marketed as adult or maybe new adult, which is interesting. Just keep that in mind given the YA looking cover. The entire cast are people of color. It sounds wonderful and will definitely scratch a certain itch if that's what you're looking for. And finally, the last book here on my list is Fathom Folk. I have an arc of this, and my goodness, the cover is even more beautiful in person. It's an adult fantasy set in a world full of water creatures, and the plot sees us in a semi-submerged city where humans and Fathom folk are trying to find equality and a balance to coexist. There are lots of Chinese and Japanese folklore that influences the story. We follow 3 main characters, each having to face different challenges. This just sounds very imaginative and beautiful, and I'm always up for more nautical fantasy books. And that's going to round out my list here for new book releases coming out in February that I think are worth checking out. Be sure to like this video if you found it helpful. Leave a comment down below and let me know of a book that I might have missed, because believe me, I could make up a list of like 50 books releasing every month, but man, I would be dead. Subscribe if you are not. I'd love to have you here. I'd love to have you in our little community. So until we meet again, happy reading.